They call us the observers. We've watched civilizations rise and fall across 10,000 worlds. We've seen species that could bend reality with their minds, beings that lived for millions of years, and creatures that could traverse galaxies in mere thoughts. But never, not once in our endless vigil, had we seen anything like what happened when humanity discovered they were not alone. The galaxy has rules, ancient, unspoken rules that every species learns. Don't expand too quickly. Don't ask too many questions. Don't fight what you cannot understand. For eons, these rules kept the balance, until a small, blue world in the outer rim produced something that made the stars themselves tremble. They called them humans, and when I watched them fight for the first time, I finally understood why even the oldest powers in the galaxy whisper their name in the dark spaces between worlds, why entire armadas change course to avoid their expanding territories, and why the Eternal Council, beings older than most stars, speak of the human problem in hushed, fearful tones. This is the story of how a species that barely learned to leave their world became the reason why ancient empires now sleep with one eye open. This is the story of humanity's wrath, and why it burns brighter than any sun in the galaxy. What you're about to witness changed everything. After this, nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. The Galactic Council chambers had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, but today carried a weight that made even the ancient Vrathari shift uncomfortably in their crystalline forms. Ambassador Zephyr, representing the observers, stood before the assembled delegates as holographic displays showed the expanding blue dot that had become the galaxy's most discussed topic. Distinguished members, Zephyr began, his voice carrying the authority of 10 million years of recorded history. We must address the human situation before it escalates beyond our control. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of sounds, chittering from the insectoid klaxi, harmonic tones from the energy-based lumens, and the deep rumbles of the stone-like granite collective. At the center of it all sat the Council of Firsts, beings so ancient that most species considered them myths. They've been space-capable for less than a century, scoffed Director Thane of the Vorthan Empire, his scaled hide rippling with disdain. A infant species with primitive technology. What threat could they possibly pose to civilizations that have ruled for millennia? Zephyr's multiple eyes focused on the Vorthan. Director Thane, with respect, you haven't been watching them as closely as we have. The humans don't follow the patterns. They don't respect the natural order of galactic development. The holographic display shifted, showing humanity's solar system. Earth glowed blue and white, seemingly peaceful, but the surrounding space told a different story. Massive construction projects orbited the planet, mining operations stripped asteroids bare, and probe swarms raced toward distant stars at unprecedented speeds. Look at their expansion rate, Zephyr continued. Most species spend centuries establishing their first colony. Humans achieved interstellar travel and colonized 3 systems within 50 years. They've built more ships in the last decade than the Confederation built in its first 1,000 years. Prime Counselor Ethereal Wind Through Ancient Stones, one of the firsts, spoke with a voice like grinding continents. Speed is not always wisdom, observer. Many species have expanded rapidly only to collapse under their own ambition. That's what we thought initially, Zephyr admitted. We prepared the standard containment protocols, expecting them to overextend and fragment like the Rashani or the Void Hunters. But humans, they adapt faster than any species we've cataloged. The display changed again, showing technical specifications that made several delegates lean forward with interest. Human ships looked crude compared to the elegant curves of Vorthan vessels or the living bioships of the Symbiont Collective, but their specifications told a different story. They've achieved 93% of theoretical maximum efficiency in their fusion drives, announced Zephyr. Their computer systems process information at rates that rival the synthetic minds. Most remarkably, they've developed these technologies independently, without access to the standard galactic knowledge base that guides most species development. A new voice entered the discussion, High Admiral Crexon of the Hegemony, a warrior race that had conquered 40 systems through pure military might. Impressive for primitives, but efficiency means nothing without experience. My fleets have faced 1,000 different species. These humans have never fought anyone but themselves. Actually, Admiral, Zephyr said carefully, that might be exactly why they're so dangerous. The chamber fell silent. Even the constant background hum of translation matrices seemed to quiet. "Explain," demanded Crexon. Zephyr activated another display, this one showing Earth's history. Cities burning, armies clashing, nuclear weapons detonating. Humans have been at war with themselves for their entire recorded history. Not border skirmishes or resource disputes like most species, but total warfare. They've developed weapons capable of destroying their own planet, used them, and then developed even deadlier ones. "Barbaric," whispered someone in the back rows. "Perhaps," agreed Zephyr, "but effective. They've turned war into a science. Every human carries the genetic memory of 10,000 conflicts. They don't just know how to fight, they know how to win." Director Thane's laugh was harsh. "One planet's worth of experience against empires spanning hundreds of worlds. Observer, your reputation for wisdom is clearly overrated." Before Zephyr could respond, an urgent communications signal pierced the chamber's shields. Only the highest priority alerts could breach the Council's security systems. "Report," commanded Prime Counselor Ethereal Wind through Ancient Stones. The voice that emerged was shaken, crackling with interference. "This is Outpost Gamma 7 on the neutral zone border. We've just received a transmission from the human fleet." Every delegate in the chamber turned toward the communication array. The neutral zone bordered human space, but no contact had been established. The humans weren't supposed to know about galactic civilization yet. "Play the transmission," ordered the Prime Counselor. Static filled the air, followed by a voice speaking in perfect galactic standard. Impossible, since humans had never been taught the language. "To whoever is listening, this is Admiral Chen of the United Earth Space Navy. We know you're out there. We've been watching your ships scout our borders for months. We've cracked your communication frequencies and learned your language. We're tired of playing hide and seek." The voice paused, and in that silence, Zephyr felt something he hadn't experienced in millennia: genuine surprise. "We're coming to meet you. We'll arrive at your outpost Gamma 7 in 72 hours. We come in peace, but we come prepared for any alternative. We hope you'll receive us as friends. If not, well, you'll discover what happens when you threaten humanity's children." The transmission ended. The silence in the chamber stretched for long moments before erupting into chaos. Delegates shouted questions, demanded explanations, called for military responses. Through it all, High Admiral Crexon sat perfectly still, his warrior's instincts recognizing something the others missed. "Observer," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the noise, "show us their fleet composition." Zephyr's sensors had been tracking human ships since first contact protocols began. The display that appeared made several delegates gasp. "Impossible," breathed Director Thane. That's a full battle fleet." 300 ships hung in space at the edge of human territory. Not the small exploration vessels they'd expected, but purpose-built warships bristling with weapons, their hulls scarred by battles fought in humanity's violent solar system. "When did they build this?" demanded Crexon. "We don't know," admitted Zephyr. "Our surveillance focused on their obvious shipyards. These vessels appeared from somewhere. Hidden construction facilities, perhaps, or—" He paused, reviewing the data, "or they built them faster than we thought possible." Prime Counselor Ethereal Wind through Ancient Stones studied the display with ancient eyes. 300 ships to make first contact. Most species send one, maybe 3 vessels for initial diplomatic meetings. "Admiral Chen said they come in peace, but prepared for alternatives," noted Delegate Harmony of Flowing Water from the Peaceful Serenity Collective. "Perhaps they simply wish to make a strong impression." High Admiral Crexon shook his massive head. "No, this isn't diplomacy. This is a demonstration of force. They're telling us they can project power across interstellar distances. They're showing us they have ships we didn't know about and technology we underestimated." He looked directly at Zephyr. "Observer, you said they've been at war with themselves their entire history." "Correct." "Then they know something the rest of the galaxy forgot long ago." Crexon's voice carried the weight of hard-won military experience. "They know that sometimes the only way to guarantee peace is to be so obviously dangerous that no one wants to fight you." The implications hung in the air like smoke from a burning world. Humanity hadn't just achieved space travel, they'd militarized it. They hadn't just learned about galactic civilization, they'd been studying it in secret. They weren't seeking permission to join the community of stars, they were announcing their arrival. "What do you recommend?" asked the Prime Counselor. Zephyr looked at the data streaming from their deep space monitors. Human ships were already moving, their fusion drives pushing them toward Outpost Gamma 7 at speeds that should have been impossible for vessels of their size. "We watch," he said finally. "We observe, and we pray to whatever gods we still believe in that Admiral Chen meant what she said about coming in peace." Because as Zephyr studied the advancing human fleet, he realized something that chilled him to his ancient core. These weren't the ships of a species seeking allies or trading partners. These were the vessels of apex predators who had spent millennia learning how to kill efficiently, now armed with technology that rivaled the galaxy's greatest powers. For the first time in his existence, Zephyr understood what prey felt like when they finally noticed the hunter had been watching them all along. The humans were coming, and nothing would ever be the same. In the depths of space, 300 human warships continued their steady advance toward first contact, their hulls reflecting the light of foreign stars. Inside those ships, men and women who had never known a world without conflict prepared to meet civilizations that had forgotten what real war looked like. The galaxy was about to remember, and in that remembering, the stars themselves would learn to fear. Outpost Gamma 7 had been constructed as a monitoring station, a peaceful installation designed to observe the younger species of the Outer Rim. Now it found itself the center of the galaxy's attention as representatives from dozens of civilizations gathered to witness humanity's first diplomatic contact. Station Commander Velter of the Coordination Corps had overseen 1,000 first contacts in his career, but none like this. His long, graceful neck curved as he studied the approaching human fleet through the station's sensors. "Still 72 hours out, exactly as they predicted," reported his aide, a young klaxon whose chittering betrayed nervousness. "Their formation hasn't changed, 300 vessels maintaining perfect geometric spacing." Velter's translator couldn't convey the subtle fear sense his aide was producing, but he could read them clearly enough. The human's precision was unnerving. Most species' first diplomatic missions showed some variation in formation, course corrections, or communication attempts. The human fleet moved like a single organism, silent except for their initial transmission. "Any attempts at additional communication?" asked Velter. "None, Commander. They acknowledged our standard greeting protocols but have maintained communication silent since then. However," the aide paused, mandibles clicking nervously, "our linguistic analysis teams have made disturbing progress on their language databases." A chill ran down Velter's spine. "Explain." "They didn't just crack our communication frequencies, sir. They've been listening to our transmissions for months, possibly years. Our xenolinguistic specialists estimate they've compiled dictionaries for over 40 species languages. They know more about us than most council members know about each other." Before Velter could respond, proximity alarms began sounding throughout the station. Impossible. The human fleet wasn't scheduled to arrive for 3 days. "Report," commanded Velter, rushing to the primary sensor array. Multiple contacts emerging from hyperspace." The sensor operator's voice cracked with shock. "Commander, they're already here." The main display showed space around the station suddenly filled with human ships. Not just the 300 they'd been tracking, but over 1,000 vessels of various sizes. Frigates, destroyers, massive dreadnoughts, and ship configurations that defied easy classification. "How," whispered Velter. His communications officer, a synthetic intelligence from the digital collective, provided the answer with mechanical precision. "Analysis indicates the fleet we were tracking was a decoy. These vessels approached through alternative routes, using gravitational slingshot maneuvers around the system's outer planets to mask their approach. Estimated travel time suggests they departed human space before sending their initial transmission." The implications struck Velter like a physical blow. The humans had planned this entire scenario. They'd sent a visible fleet to focus attention while their real diplomatic force traveled hidden routes. This wasn't simple caution. This was military-grade strategic thinking applied to first contact. A communication request came through official diplomatic channels. Velter accepted, and the main screen filled with the image of a human female. Admiral Chen stood on what appeared to be a ship's bridge, her uniform crisp and bearing suggesting decades of command experience. Behind her, Velter could see other humans working at stations with an efficiency that spoke of extensive training. "Commander Velter," Admiral Chen said, speaking his name with perfect pronunciation despite it belonging to a language humans supposedly didn't know. "Thank you for receiving us. I hope our arrival method didn't cause alarm." "Admiral Chen," Velter managed, struggling to maintain diplomatic composure. "Your strategic approach has certainly made an impression. The Galactic Council representatives are quite eager to begin formal contact procedures." Something flickered in the human's eyes, amusement, perhaps, or assessment. "Of course they are. We've been listening to their communications since we detected your surveillance of our systems. Quite a gathering you've assembled." Velter felt his throat constrict. The humans knew about the council representatives. They'd been monitoring diplomatic communications on supposedly secure channels. "Permission to dock a diplomatic vessel," Admiral Chen continued smoothly. "We'd prefer to conduct initial discussions face-to-face. We find it builds better understanding." Within hours, Station Gamma 7's primary docking bay received its first human visitors. Velter watched from the observation deck as their shuttle approached, a sleek vessel that moved with predatory grace, its hull scarred by what looked like weapons testing. The airlock cycled, and humanity stepped onto a galactic stage. Admiral Chen emerged first, followed by a small delegation that immediately caught Velter's attention. These weren't just diplomats. The woman beside Chen moved with the fluid precision of a combat specialist. The man behind them carried himself like someone accustomed to violence. Even their apparent scientist, an elderly human with kind eyes, wore clothing designed for rapid movement. "Commander Velter," Admiral Chen extended her hand in what Velter's cultural database identified as a human greeting gesture. "Thank you for hosting this meeting." As Velter tentatively reciprocated the gesture, he noticed calluses on the Admiral's palm, the kind that came from weapons training. This was a warrior masquerading as a diplomat. The meeting room held representatives from 18 different species, each one carefully studying humanity's first galactic ambassadors. Velter had arranged seating according to standard diplomatic protocols, but Admiral Chen politely declined the offered chair. "If you don't mind," she said, "we prefer to stand for important discussions, habit from our world." The humans positioned themselves with their backs to the room's reinforced wall, maintaining clear sightlines to all exits. Even in this peaceful setting, they were positioning for potential combat. Prime Counselor Ethereal Wind Through Ancient Stones spoke first, his ancient voice carrying the weight of eons. "Young humans, we welcome you to the galactic community. Your species shows remarkable potential, and we look forward to guiding your development along established paths." Admiral Chen smiled, but Velter noticed it didn't reach her eyes. "We appreciate the welcome, Prime Counselor. However, we should clarify something from the start. We're not here seeking guidance." The chamber fell silent. No species had ever addressed the Council of Firsts so directly during first contact. "We've been observing galactic civilization for quite some time," Admiral Chen continued. "Your trade routes, your territories, your conflicts. We understand the established order. We're here to announce that humanity will be joining that order as equals, not as students." Director Thane of the Vorthan Empire rose from his seat, scales rippling with indignation. "Presumptuous words from a species barely capable of interstellar travel. You occupy 3 star systems. The Vorthan Empire spans 200 worlds across." 237 worlds, Admiral Chen interrupted. "Though your mining operations on Vorthan Prime 7 are producing below projected yields due to labor unrest, and your 3rd fleet is currently dealing with pirates in the Kepler sector. Should I continue?" Director Thane's mouth snapped shut. The specific information the human possessed was classified at the highest levels. High Admiral Crexon leaned forward, his warrior's instincts engaged. "How do you know those details?" "Because we've been watching," replied Dr. Elizabeth Martinez, the elderly scientist. "Your species communicate across vast distances using predictable signal patterns. Your computer systems use encryption algorithms that were cutting-edge by your standards but primitive by ours. We've been reading your mail for 2 years." The admission sent shock waves through the assembled delegates. Species spent centuries developing the trust necessary to share sensitive information. Humans had simply taken it. "This is intolerable," sputtered Delegate Harmony of Flowing Water. "Privacy violations, espionage, unauthorized surveillance. These actions violate every principle of civilized contact." Commander Sarah Kim, the combat specialist, spoke for the first time. With respect, Delegate, your civilized contact protocols include comprehensive surveillance of developing species. We detected your monitoring stations, your probe networks, your behavioral analysis programs. You've been studying us like laboratory specimens for months. That's different, protested Harmony of Flowing Water. That's standard procedure for evaluating species readiness for contact. Exactly, said Admiral Chen. It's standard for you to study us, but inappropriate for us to study you. This kind of double standard is precisely why we felt it necessary to demonstrate our capabilities before beginning discussions. Zephyr the Observer, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. Admiral Chen, your species' approach to first contact is unprecedented. Most developing civilizations seek to learn from established galactic powers. You seem more interested in establishing parity. Admiral Chen turned her full attention to Zephyr, and he felt the weight of her assessment. Observer, you've been cataloging species for millions of years. In that time, how many civilizations have successfully challenged the established galactic order? The question hung in the air. Zephyr's memory banks contained records of thousands of species that had tried and failed to alter galactic power structures. The few that succeeded had done so through millennia of gradual change. None have done so quickly, Zephyr admitted. Because they followed your rules, Admiral Chen said simply. They accepted junior status, sought guidance from established powers, and gradually integrated into existing hierarchies. By the time they were strong enough to change things, they were too invested in the system to want to. Prime Counselor Ethereal Wind through Ancient Stones shifted his massive form. You suggest there is something wrong with stability, with order. I suggest that your stability comes at the cost of stagnation, replied Dr. Martinez. We've analyzed galactic technological development over the past 10,000 years. Innovation has slowed to a crawl. Most species achieve a certain technological plateau and stop advancing. Why push boundaries when the established powers already know everything worth knowing? Because pushing boundaries is dangerous, rumbled Director Thane. Species that advance too quickly often destroy themselves. Commander Kim's smile was sharp as a blade. Director, humanity has been on the verge of self-destruction for our entire recorded history. We've faced extinction-level wars, environmental collapse, resource depletion, and cosmic impacts. We're still here. Luck, suggested High Admiral Crexon. Adaptation, corrected Admiral Chen. Every crisis made us stronger, smarter, more resilient. Your species have had the luxury of stable galactic civilization to protect you. We never had that luxury, so we learned to protect ourselves. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity wasn't asking to join galactic civilization. They were announcing that galactic civilization was going to have to accommodate them. Velter watched the faces around the room, seeing a mixture of shock, fear, and grudging admiration. These humans had done something unprecedented. They'd achieved technological parity with established galactic powers in decades rather than centuries, then announced their arrival with a show of force that demonstrated both capability and confidence. What do you want? Asked Prime Counselor Ethereal Wind through Ancient Stones finally. Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly. What we've always wanted, Prime Counselor, to explore, to learn, to grow, to find our place among the stars, but we'll do it as equals, not as subjects. We're not here to conquer or dominate. We're here to participate. And if we refuse to recognize your claimed status? Asked Director Thane. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as Admiral Chen's diplomatic facade slipped, revealing the warrior beneath. Director Thane, you're welcome to try to enforce that refusal, but I should mention that our fleet currently surrounding this station represents less than 5% of humanity's total naval capacity. We'd prefer friendship, but we're prepared for alternatives. The silence that followed was profound. Every delegate in the room understood the message. Humanity wasn't making requests, they were stating facts. The galaxy could accept them as equals, or it could test their resolve. Velter realized he was witnessing history. Not just first contact, but the first time in galactic memory that a species had demanded respect rather than seeking approval. As the meeting continued into the station's night cycle, one thing became increasingly clear. The galaxy's comfortable order was about to change forever. The humans had arrived not as supplicants seeking wisdom, but as equals demanding recognition. and they had brought enough firepower to ensure they got it. 6 months after first contact, the galaxy watched with growing unease as humanity established diplomatic and trade relations at a pace that shattered every precedent. Human colonies appeared in seemingly empty systems, their ships traveled routes that had been considered impassable, and their technology advanced with terrifying speed through careful observation and rapid iteration of galactic innovations. But it was in the Kepler sector where the galaxy would truly learn what humanity meant by being prepared for alternatives. Fleet Admiral Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, humanity's first dreadnought designed specifically for galactic-scale warfare. Around his ship, the third human fleet maintained formation, 200 vessels representing humanity's growing naval power. They had been dispatched to investigate reports of systematic raids on human mining operations in the outer colonies. Admiral, called Communications Officer Lieutenant Torres, were receiving a transmission from Kepler Station. It's not good news, sir. The main screen filled with the image of Commander Patricia Reyes, her face streaked with smoke and her uniform torn. Behind her, fires burned through the station's corridors. Admiral Webb, Kepler Station is under attack. Unknown vessels, configuration suggests hegemony raiders, but they're not responding to standard communication attempts. They've already destroyed 3 of our mining platforms and are targeting civilian populations. Her image flickered as another explosion rocked the station. Admiral, they're not just raiding. They're trying to exterminate every human in the system. The transmission cut to static. Admiral Webb had served in the Solar Wars, had commanded ships in the asteroid belt conflicts, and had seen humanity at its most violent. But this was different. This was an attack on human civilians by aliens who apparently considered genocide an acceptable military tactic. Navigation, plot a course for Kepler Station, maximum burn. Communications, get me a direct channel to Earth Command and Admiral Chen's diplomatic mission. His voice carried the cold fury of a professional soldier who had just watched innocents die. It seems the galaxy wants to test our resolve. The response from Earth was swift and uncompromising. Admiral Chen's voice came through the quantum communication array with crystal clarity. Admiral Webb, you have full authorization to protect human interests by any means necessary. The Galactic Council has been notified that humanity considers attacks on our civilians to be acts of war. Respond accordingly. As the Third Fleet raced toward the Kepler sector, Admiral Webb reviewed intelligence reports on the hegemony forces. High Admiral Crexon's species had built their reputation on overwhelming firepower and ruthless efficiency. They conquered through fear, crushing resistance before it could organize. Sir, reported Intelligence Officer Commander Sarah Park, we're detecting massive hegemony fleet movements throughout their territory. This isn't a random raid. They're mobilizing their entire 7th Battle Group, over 800 vessels. Admiral Webb studied the tactical displays. 800 ships against his 200. By conventional galactic warfare standards, the humans were outnumbered 4-1, odds that should guarantee defeat. Commander Park, do we have detailed specifications on hegemony ship designs? Yes, sir. Standard galactic database information, plus additional data gathered during our diplomatic monitoring operations. And they have similar information about our ships. Commander Park's smile was predatory. No, sir, they don't. Human ship designs aren't in any galactic database. We've been very careful about what technical specifications we've shared. Admiral Webb nodded. The hegemony was about to learn the difference between fighting civilized galactic powers and fighting a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of war. The Third Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system to find a massacre in progress. Hegemony ships, massive crystalline constructs bristling with energy weapons, surrounded the burning remains of human installations. Escape pods drifted in space, some whole, others showing signs of deliberate targeting. "Bastards," whispered someone on the bridge. Admiral Webb's voice cut through the anger. "All ships, battle formation Omega. They want to see what happens when you attack human civilians. Let's show them." The human fleet transformed. Where most galactic navies fought in loose formations designed to minimize losses, the humans closed ranks, their ships moving with the coordinated precision of predators. Each vessel's armor plating shifted, revealing weapon systems that had been hidden during diplomatic encounters. "High Admiral Crexon, commanding the hegemony forces from his flagship Eternal Dominion, watched the human approach with growing confusion. These ships were smaller than his battle cruisers, less numerous than his fleet, and constructed with technology that appeared primitive compared to hegemony standards. "Why do they advance so aggressively?" he asked his tactical officer. "Do they not understand the numerical disadvantage?" "Perhaps their helping will accept their surrender, Admiral." Crexon considered this. Humans had seemed reasonable during diplomatic contacts, if arrogant. Perhaps a demonstration of hegemony superiority would convince them to accept vassal status. "Open a communication channel," he commanded. Admiral Webb's image appeared on the Eternal Dominion's main screen, his expression cold as interstellar space. "Human Admiral," Crexon began, "you are vastly outnumbered. Withdraw your forces and accept hegemony authority over this system, and your crews will be treated honorably." Admiral Webb's response was delivered in a voice that carried the weight of humanity's violent history. "Hi, Admiral Crexon, you have attacked human civilians. You have destroyed our installations and murdered our people. There is only one response to such actions." "Surrender," suggested Crexon. "War." The communication channel closed, and the human fleet accelerated to attack velocity. What followed redefined galactic warfare. The humans didn't fight like any species the hegemony had encountered. Instead of maintaining formation and exchanging long-range fire, they closed to point-blank range with suicidal aggression. Their ships were designed not just for combat, but for surviving combat. Layered armor, redundant systems, and damage control capabilities that let them continue fighting long after conventional vessels would have been crippled. The UES Indomitable engaged the Eternal Dominion directly, her weapons tearing into the hegemony flagship's crystalline hull with focused fury. When hegemony returned fire cracked her armor, the Indomitable's damage control teams sealed the breaches and kept fighting. When her main guns overheated, backup weapons systems came online. "Impossible," Crexon roared as his tactical displays showed human ships continuing to fight despite damage that should have destroyed them. "What are their ships made of?" His sensor operator's voice shook with disbelief. "Admiral, their armor appears to be composite layering designed for maximum energy absorption. Their internal structure uses redundant support systems. These ships are built to take punishment and keep fighting." Around them, the battle raged with intensity that stunned both sides. Hegemony vessels, accustomed to enemies retreating after taking heavy damage, found themselves facing humans who treated crippling damage as an invitation to fight harder. Human ships, designed by a species that had learned warfare through necessity, proved capable of dealing and absorbing punishment on scales that defied galactic combat doctrine. The turning point came when the human ship UES Relentless, her hull breached in 3 places and her main engines offline, used emergency thrusters to ram a hegemony battle cruiser. The collision destroyed both ships, but the explosion damaged 2 other hegemony vessels and created a gap in their formation. Admiral Webb seized the opportunity immediately. "All ships exploit the breach. Show them what concentrated firepower means." The human fleet poured through the gap with coordinated precision, their smaller ships using superior maneuverability to get inside the hegemony formation, where the larger alien vessels couldn't bring their heavy weapons to bear effectively. But it was the human fighters that truly shocked the hegemony forces. Unlike the automated drones most species used, human fighters carried living pilots, men and women who flew their craft with a combination of technology and intuition that no artificial intelligence could match. They dove through crossfire that should have been fatal, executed maneuvers that violated safety protocols, and pressed attacks with a fury that terrified seasoned hegemony warriors. Squadron leader Maria Santos, leading the fighter wing from the UES Defiant, had already lost half her pilots when she received the order to attack the hegemony command ship. Her remaining fighters were damaged, her ammunition was running low, and her own craft's life support was failing. "All remaining fighters," she broadcast on the squadron frequency, "follow me in, for Earth, for our families, for everyone they murdered here." 12 human fighters dove toward the massive Eternal Dominion, their weapons blazing. Anti-aircraft fire filled the space around them, brilliant energy beams that turned several fighters into expanding clouds of debris. But the surviving craft pressed their attack with determination that bordered on madness. Santos's fighter, trailing atmosphere from a hull breach, made it through the defensive fire and released her remaining missiles directly into the Eternal Dominion's bridge tower. The explosion was spectacular, but more importantly, it severed the Hegemony Command ship's primary communication array. Without central coordination, the Hegemony formation began to falter. Individual captains, trained to follow orders rather than exercise initiative, found themselves fighting independently against humans who had been raised on stories of desperate battles and impossible victories. The tide turned. High Admiral Chen, his flagship damaged and his fleet in disarray, made a decision that would echo through galactic history. Instead of pressing the attack or attempting to regroup, he ordered a full retreat. "All ships withdraw to hyperspace immediately," he commanded. "This engagement is concluded." As the surviving Hegemony vessels fled the system, Admiral Webb surveyed the battlefield. The Third Fleet had taken heavy casualties, 37 ships destroyed, another 40 badly damaged. By galactic standards, it was a devastating loss. But they had driven off 800 Hegemony vessels with a force one-fourth that size. "Admiral," reported Commander Park, "we're receiving communications from across the galaxy. Word of the battle is spreading through diplomatic channels." "What's the reaction?" "Mixed, sir. Some species are expressing support for our right to defend ourselves. Others are concerned about the implications." Admiral Webb understood. Humanity had just demonstrated that they could not only fight galactic powers, but win against overwhelming odds. The comfortable assumption that established civilizations were militarily superior to newcomers had been shattered. "Get me a channel to Admiral Chen at the diplomatic mission," he ordered. "She needs to know that the galaxy just got a very clear demonstration of what human alternatives look like." On Outpost Gamma 7, now serving as humanity's primary diplomatic station, Admiral Chen received the battle reports with mixed emotions. The victory was satisfying, but she understood its broader implications. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. Zephyr the Observer found her on the station's observation deck, staring out at the human fleet that maintained constant patrol around the facility. "Admiral," he said quietly, "I've been analyzing the battle data from Kepler. Your species fought with a coordination and determination that defies conventional military doctrine." Admiral Chen turned to face him. "Observer, conventional military doctrine assumes that soldiers will break under pressure, that ships will retreat when damaged, that species will accept defeat when the odds are against them. Humans don't make those assumptions." "Why not?" "Because we've never had the luxury of assuming someone else would save us. Every war we've fought has been for survival. Every battle could have meant extinction. We learned long ago that sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything to protect what matters." Zephyr processed this information, comparing it to his vast database of galactic military history. No species had ever developed such a comprehensive warrior culture while simultaneously advancing their civilization. "The galaxy is afraid," he admitted finally. "Good," replied Admiral Chen. "Fear breeds respect, and respect prevents wars. The Hegemony attacked us because they thought we were weak. Now they know better." "And the other species? What happens when they decide humanity has become too dangerous to coexist with?" Admiral Chen's smile was cold as space itself. "Then they'll discover what happens when you threaten humanity's survival. The Hegemony learned what we do to enemies who attack our people. The galaxy might need to learn what we do to threats who try to eliminate us entirely." As if summoned by their conversation, a communication alert sounded throughout the station. The message was brief, but carried implications that would reshape galactic politics. "This is High Admiral Chen of the Hegemony Defense Forces, transmitting to all human diplomatic representatives. The Hegemony formally apologizes for the unauthorized attack on human civilian installations in the Kepler sector. The officers responsible have been disciplined, and full reparations will be provided. The Hegemony desires continued peaceful relations with humanity." It was the first formal apology one galactic power had ever issued to another in recorded history. Zephyr stared at the message display in amazement. "In 10 million years of observation, I've never seen the Hegemony apologize to anyone." "That's because they've never fought anyone who made them pay for every victory," Admiral Chen replied. "Now they understand what it costs to fight humans. The question is whether the rest of the galaxy will learn from their example, or whether they'll need their own lessons. The Battle of Kepler had ended, but its echoes would reverberate through galactic civilization for generations. Humanity had proven they could fight and win against overwhelming odds. More importantly, they had proven they would fight, regardless of the cost. The galaxy was beginning to understand why the stars themselves might learn to fear humanity's wrath. 2 years after the Battle of Kepler, the galaxy had settled into an uneasy new equilibrium. Humanity now held 23 star systems, their expansion driven not by conquest, but by the simple fact that no species dared oppose their claim to uninhabited worlds. The human definition of uninhabited, however, had proven frustratingly broad to established powers accustomed to maintaining buffer zones and resource reserves. On the neutral world of Concordia, representatives from 47 species had gathered for the first Galactic Security Summit in 3 centuries. The topic was singular: the human problem. Zephyr the Observer stood before the assembled delegates, his ancient form radiating the weight of accumulated knowledge. Around him, beings that had ruled the galaxy for millennia waited for answers to a question that had haunted their sleep. How do you contain a species that refuses to be contained? Distinguished representatives, Zephyr began, my report on humanity's integration into galactic civilization reveals patterns that challenge our fundamental understanding of species development. The holographic display showed the expansion of human influence across known space, not through military conquest, but through something far more disturbing to established powers: innovation. In 24 months, humanity has achieved technological advances that typically require centuries. They've developed faster-than-light communications, improved hyperspace efficiency by 30%, and created defensive technologies that our own species are now seeking to purchase or replicate. Director Thane of the Vorthan Empire shifted uncomfortably in his ceremonial chair. Observer, surely their rapid advancement can be explained by access to galactic knowledge databases. Actually, no, Zephyr replied. Humanity has consistently declined access to our technological repositories. They claim they prefer to develop innovations independently, using galactic technology as inspiration rather than template. The results have been unprecedented. A new voice entered the discussion: Synthesis Prime Alpha of the Digital Collective, a consciousness that existed as pure information. Observer, our analysis indicates human technological development follows patterns associated with species under extreme survival pressure. Yet they now exist in a stable galactic environment. Why do they continue advancing at crisis response speeds? Before Zephyr could answer, the summit's security systems activated emergency protocols. Admiral Chen's image appeared on every screen in the chamber, her expression carrying news that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying across the chamber with perfect clarity. I apologize for interrupting your discussions about humanity, but recent events require immediate galactic attention. 47 minutes ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected signatures consistent with extragalactic contact. The chamber erupted in chaos. Extragalactic contact was theoretical, something that might happen in millions of years, when galactic technology advanced sufficiently for intergalactic travel. Admiral Chen continued over the noise. The contact signatures are not exploratory in nature. Initial analysis suggests a military force of unprecedented scale entering our galaxy from the Magellanic approach vector. All human fleets are being mobilized in response. Prime Counselor Ethereal went through ancient stones, his voice cutting through the chaos like gravity through space, demanded attention. Admiral Chen, what evidence supports these claims? Extragalactic travel requires technology beyond current galactic capabilities. Prime Counselor, our evidence is empirical. Long-range sensors are detecting gravitational distortions consistent with massive fleet movements. Energy signatures suggest propulsion technology that exceeds known galactic standards by orders of magnitude. Preliminary estimates indicate approximately 50,000 vessels of unknown configuration. The number struck the assembled delegates like a physical blow. The largest fleet any single species had ever assembled was the Confederation's Grand Armada, 3,000 vessels representing their entire military capacity. 50,000 ships suggested a civilization with resources that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. High Admiral Chen, his massive form tense with warrior's instincts, leaned forward. Admiral Chen, what is humanity's assessment of these visitors' intentions? Admiral Chen's expression grew grim. High Admiral, our xenosociology teams have been analyzing the approach patterns. These vessels are not following any recognizable diplomatic or exploration protocols. They're advancing in military formation toward the galactic core. If their intentions were peaceful, they would have transmitted communication attempts or demonstration signals. Instead, they appear to be conducting reconnaissance sweeps of inhabited systems. The implications hung in the chamber like smoke from a dying world. An extragalactic force, vastly superior in numbers and technology, was approaching with apparent hostile intent. "What do you propose?" asked Director Thane, his scales rippling with barely controlled fear. "Military coordination on a scale never before attempted," Admiral Chen replied without hesitation. "Every spacefaring species contributing to a unified defense fleet, shared intelligence, integrated command structure, and combined technological resources." The chamber fell silent as species that had spent millennia maintaining careful balance and autonomy contemplated unprecedented cooperation. Delegate Harmony of Flowing Water spoke for many when she asked, "Admiral, why should we believe humanity's assessment? Perhaps these are simply advanced galactic travelers from regions we haven't fully explored." Admiral Chen's response was delivered with the precision of a tactical briefing. "Delegate, our deep space monitors have detected these vessels using technology that manipulates spacetime itself. They're not traveling through hyperspace. They're bending reality around their fleet to achieve faster-than-light movement. This represents physics applications that no known galactic species has achieved." Synthesis Prime Alpha processed the data streams from human monitoring stations, its digital consciousness analyzing information at computational speeds that organic minds couldn't match. Confirmation. Human sensor data indicates technological signatures incompatible with known galactic science. These vessels appear to be using controlled singularities for propulsion and defensive systems that generate localized spacetime distortions. The weight of impending crisis settled over the summit. An extragalactic force with physics-defying technology was approaching, and the galaxy's response would determine whether civilizations that had flourished for millions of years would survive the next decade. "Admiral Chen," said Prime Counselor Ethereal Wind through Ancient Stones, "assuming we accept your proposal for unified defense, who would command such an unprecedented coalition?" The question that every delegate had been avoiding was finally spoken. Command authority over a galactic defense force would represent power beyond anything any species had ever wielded. Admiral Chen's answer surprised everyone. "Joint command structure," she said simply. "Human strategic planning coordinated with hegemony tactical doctrine, observer intelligence networks, Vorthan logistics capabilities, and digital collective computational support. No single species commands the coalition, but each contributes their greatest strengths." High Admiral Chen studied the human admiral with newfound respect. "You would give up supreme command of the largest military force in galactic history." "High Admiral, we would never have supreme command. Command requires trust, and trust must be earned. Humanity has been part of galactic civilization for less than 3 years. We're not asking you to follow us blindly into battle. We're asking you to fight alongside us." The distinction was crucial. Leadership through cooperation rather than domination, a concept that challenged everything galactic powers understood about military hierarchy. Over the following hours, the impossible became inevitable. Species that had maintained careful distance for millennia agreed to share military secrets, coordinate strategies, and combine technologies in ways that would have been unthinkable before the extragalactic threat emerged. The Vorthan Empire contributed their advanced manufacturing capabilities, transforming asteroid fields into shipyards that produced vessels at unprecedented rates. The digital collective provided computational support that allowed real-time coordination across galactic distances. The hegemony offered their warrior traditions and tactical expertise. Dozens of smaller species contributed specialized technologies, resources, and personnel. But it was humanity's contribution that proved most significant. Strategic thinking shaped by a species that had never known peace. The extragalactic force assumes we'll fight like a traditional galactic civilization, explained General Harrison Clark, humanity's chief strategic planner, during a coalition briefing 6 months after first contact with the approaching fleet. They expect us to defend key worlds, protect important resources, and maintain structured battle lines. Around the planning table, representatives from 18 species studied human tactical assessments with growing understanding. Instead, General Clark continued, we're going to fight like humans. We're going to make them pay for every light year of advance, force them to fight battles on our terms, and ensure that any victory they achieve comes at such a cost that their invasion becomes unsustainable. The strategy was revolutionary by galactic standards. Defensive warfare designed not to hold territory, but to exhaust the enemy through attrition. Every system would be contested, every world would be defended, and even defeat would inflict maximum damage on the invaders. When the extragalactic fleet finally arrived at the galaxy's outer rim, they encountered something unprecedented in their eons of conquest: unified resistance. The first contact battle at the edge of the outer territories revealed the true scale of the threat. Extragalactic vessels were massive, each ship the size of small moons, equipped with weapons that could sterilize planets and defenses that rendered conventional attacks ineffective. But the galaxy had learned from humanity's example. Instead of meeting the invaders in traditional fleet engagements, the coalition forces employed tactics that would have been considered dishonorable by galactic standards just years before. They used guerrilla strikes, sacrificial attacks, and coordinated swarm tactics that overwhelmed individual enemy vessels through concentrated firepower from multiple directions. Commander Maria Santos, now leading a mixed squadron of human, Vorthan, and hegemony vessels, demonstrated the new paradigm when her force engaged an extragalactic dreadnought in the Epsilon sector. All vessels attack pattern Humanity 7, she commanded. Remember, we're not trying to win this battle. We're trying to make them pay such a price for winning that they reconsider the entire war. Her squadron dove toward the massive enemy vessel with coordinated precision, their combined weapons focusing on specific target points, identified by digital collective analysis. When the extragalactic ship's defenses adapted to their attack patterns, they immediately shifted tactics, using maneuvers that sacrificed efficiency for unpredictability. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the extragalactic dreadnought was destroyed, but Santos had lost 60% of her force. By traditional galactic standards, it was a defeat. By human standards, it was a victory that taught the galaxy how to fight impossible odds. The war continued for 3 years, with battles raging across 1,000 light-years of space. The extragalactic force possessed overwhelming technological superiority, but they had never faced an enemy that treated survival itself as a weapon. Every system they conquered required months of brutal fighting. Every victory cost them ships, resources, and personnel that couldn't be easily replaced across intergalactic distances. Most importantly, they found themselves fighting not just human tactics, but human determination spreading through species that had never experienced total war. The turning point came at the Battle of the Core Worlds, where Admiral Chen led a coalition fleet in what military historians would later call the most desperate gambit in galactic history. All ships, she broadcast across the fleet communications network, her voice reaching vessels crewed by dozens of different species. This is where we make our stand. Not for territory, not for resources, but for the right to exist as free civilizations. Today, we fight not as separate species, but as one galaxy united against extinction. The battle that followed redefined what galactic civilization thought possible. Ships from species that had been enemies for millennia fought alongside each other with coordination that amazed observers. Vorthan captains used hegemony tactics, digital collective processing power guided organic intuition, and through it all, human strategic doctrine provided the framework for impossible cooperation. When the extragalactic invasion fleet finally withdrew, battered and exhausted by 3 years of relentless attrition, they left behind a galaxy forever changed. The post-war reconstruction revealed transformations that went far beyond military cooperation. Species that had fought together began sharing technologies, establishing trade relationships, and forming alliances that transcended their previous isolation. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. Zephyr the Observer stood once again before a galactic assembly. But now the chamber held representatives from over 90 species, civilizations that had emerged from hiding or isolation to join a galaxy that had proven it could unite against existential threats. The Extragalactic War has taught us something profound, Zephyr announced. For millions of years, galactic civilization prioritized stability, order, and gradual progress. We feared change, discouraged innovation, and maintained systems designed to prevent any single species from disrupting our careful balance. The assembled delegates listened with attention that would have been impossible before humanity's arrival. Humanity showed us that stability without growth is stagnation, that order without challenge leads to weakness, and that true strength comes not from avoiding conflict, but from learning how to face it together. In the human section of the assembly, Admiral Chen sat quietly, watching as species after species rose to announce new collaborative initiatives, technological sharing agreements, and mutual defense pacts. The galaxy that emerged from the Extragalactic War bore little resemblance to the cautious, hierarchical civilization that had first encountered humanity. It was dynamic, innovative, and united by shared experience of fighting for survival against impossible odds. But more than that, it was a galaxy that had learned humanity's greatest lesson, that sometimes the only way to preserve what you value is to be willing to risk everything to protect it. As the assembly session continued deep into the galactic night cycle, one truth became clear to all who witnessed it. The stars no longer needed to fear humanity's wrath, because that wrath had become the galaxy's shield against the darkness beyond. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through force of arms or political manipulation. They had transformed it through example, showing civilizations that had forgotten how to fight that sometimes fighting was the only way to ensure peace. The galaxy would never be the same, and perhaps that was exactly what it had needed all along.